The scene shifts 3 years later, where Tessia asks Art to let's go because they're going to be late. She grabs his leg and pulls, prompting Art to give in and agree to go. However, he discovers that she used her manner to twist his ankle. Couldn't she have found a gentler way to wake him up? She retorts that it wasn't her fault he didn't wake up when she asked him nicely. Besides, he should feel grateful that such a pretty girl like her was waking him up. He replies that he finds the maids there very pretty. She asks if he said anything. Heading downstairs, she asks if he thought the maid was pretty. He asks her to leave that topic. Varian mentions that they both took a long time, so he got them ready for their lessons. Art thinks that there exist 4 basic elements and their higher forms. Those higher elements are ice, gravity, lightning and sound, and they can only be controlled by a mage who has gone beyond mastery of their foundational elements. They could call that as deviance. Dwarves can only manipulate earth and fire, but elves possess a much higher affinity to those 2 elements. And their distinct tarot trait lies in the fact that all dwarves could mold and bend metal, while talented dwarves could control fire and earth to such a high degree that they were able to conjure and manipulate magma. Elves were only limited to water, wind and earth elements, but with a much higher affinity than humans. In rare cases, elves could also produce a special deviant type capable of controlling plants. However, elves weren't able to produce mages that could manipulate the higher forms of water and earth. Human mages possess the ability to manipulate any 4 of the basic elements. They were also the only race capable of producing deviance in any of those elements, along with anomalies that couldn't be categorized into any of the elements, like emitters and healers. There exists a suitable power balance between the 3 races, taking into account population, overall inherent affinity to the elements, and diversity in mages. He then asks Varian if that was enough explanation. Varian replied that it was passable. Tessia was lying there next to Art. Just Tessia raised a question that she knew the whole assimilation process was meant to get Art's body ready to handle his best will, but wouldn't it have been better to have him train his body physically while using magic? Art thinks that he knew all along from his lessons beforehand, but the difference in the races really showed over those 3 years. While humans were considered talented, they typically awakened in their late preteen years. It wasn't surprising for Sleven children to awaken as soon as 10, and for Tessia, that had happened even earlier at the tender age of 9. Varian asks Tessia if she's angry that she's only getting beat up in training. She agrees and then looks at Art. Art thinks that since then she had been training her conjuring skills with a tutor while learning to fight from her grandfather, and she was going to be quite the monster in the future, though he shouldn't be one to talk. Varian tells Tessia that what Art had been doing those 3 years was basically fusing his bones, muscles and organs with his mana, and he hadn't been physically training like her. But Varian could assure her that once that was over, his body would be stronger and more resilient than a veteran warrior. She asked if that was for real, wondering why he was so sensitive when she hit him. He replied that he still felt pain. Varian said that it seemed like the process of fusion hadn't sapped away his energy enough, so was he ready? And after that day he would be a true beast tamer, unlike those lucky adventurers who merely used their beast will like tools. He was going to ignite Art's mana by inserting a large amount of his own mana. Art would feel a bit warm, but that shouldn't be too bad. Then he created a white light and placed his hand on Art's chest. Art felt a lot of pain, and then a blast hit him, causing him to be thrown back and hit with a tree before falling to the ground. Varian and Tessia were shocked to see that, and they both rushed to him. Tessia asked if he was fine. He replied that he was fine. Varian said to him that he knew Art had his reasons for not telling Varian until then, but he had to ask what sort of beast gave its will to him. Art replied that the beast was a dragon. Varian was shocked to hear that it was a dragon. Art said that it was a real dragon tamer, and he was trained by her. He fainted there, and after he woke up, he found himself lying on the bed. Varian was sitting next to him and asked how he was feeling. Art replied that he should be asking that question, and the last thing he remembered before falling unconscious was Varian going crazy. Varian replied that he had calmed down. Art commented that it was good and he could trust them to keep that a secret even after he left. Varian mentioned that on the topic of leaving, the date of his departure had been set for 4 months from then. Art was shocked and said that he thought it would be another 2 years. Varian replied that an interracial tournament among the Three Kingdoms youths, which had been in the works, had finally been confirmed. Portals in the Cyrus city of Sapin would be open to both the Eleanor Kingdom and the Kingdom of the Darv during that time. Art asked why Tessia wasn't there, so Varian told him that he shouldn't worry about her. He knew that Art had been checking in on them over the past few years through Rinia, but Art would finally be able to see them in person. Art agreed and said that 4 months still felt pretty soon. Varian moved his hands on Art and said that he would make Art wish those 4 months were over soon. Now that Art had finished his assimilation, his training would get even harder. Art should take some rest, and Varian was going to tell that to Tessia gently before he left. Art thought of the 4 months, and then saw the small ledge he got from Sylvie, which was breaking a bit. Art wondered if the small ledge was breaking. Suddenly it really did break, and a small monster emerged from it, yawning as it lay down. Art lifted it up and realized it was a dragon, incredibly cute. Just then, the dragon bit his hand, leaving a mark. Art heard someone calling Mama and wondered who it was, then looked at the dragon. The calls continued several times. Art, getting back to bed, wondered if she could talk inside his mind. He told the dragon to call him Papa, not Mama, and the dragon complied. Art hugged her and said he would call her Sylvie, after her mother. Sylvie made some sounds and Art asked if she liked that. He could really feel a connection, and it seemed like the mark wasn't as simple as it looked. It felt like it was actually connecting him to the little dragon. At 8 years old, with a tattoo, he was now a father. He was truly a rebel. As Art was sleeping in his room, he suddenly heard someone screaming and woke up, wondering who it was. He realized it was Tessia, lifting Sylvie and commenting on how cute she was. Then Art went back to sleep. The next day they both came downstairs and Tessia learned that Art was able to communicate with the monster in her mind. She thought Art was lucky, and maybe she could communicate with the monster too, and it would like her as well. Art replied that the dragon would like Tessia if she stopped looking at her like she was some sort of predator. Tessia called Varian and told him to come and see Art's pet. Varian was shocked to see Sylvie, and after calming down he said that he was going to die early if he kept getting shocked like that. Art explained everything to Varian, including where Sylvie had come from, and he learned that beings like Sylvie usually only hatch in the presence of their kin. They tried to think of why she might have hatched in front of Art, but the only reason they could think of was the fact that he had fully activated Sylvie's will the previous day. During training, Art asked Varian if he thought he would have to hide Sylvie once he returned, as most people wouldn't know she was so powerful. Varian replied that Art should just pass her off as a rare mana beast. However, they had other things to worry about. They had held back on strengthening Art's mana core during the assimilation, but now that he had fully awakened, they needed to focus on training both his core and his new dragon will. Art asked what he needed to do. Varian smirked and, throwing a sword, said that he found the best way to access the first stage of Art's beast will, along with strengthening his mana core, was to constantly engage in combat. Art agreed that it made sense to him. Varian added that it would also make sense for Art to fight a fellow beast tamer, as using those skills against his will would help him even more. With a roar, Varian transformed into a beast and asked Art to fight. Art thought that beast mages were capable of harnessing the unique abilities inherited from mana beasts. The first stage, known as the acquire phase, allowed the beast tamer to borrow the beast's inherent strengths. However, it was only at the second stage, the integrate phase, that the mage could truly utilize their beast's unique abilities and characteristics. For Varian, who had only unlocked that second stage after decades of studying his beast will, he was now able to utilize the deadly prowess of a shadow panther. The beast urged Art to pay attention while it sneaked up behind him. Art wondered if it was saying that it could sneak up on him even after warning him. Suddenly, the beast disappeared and came from behind to place its hand on Art. Art thought it was so fast, and as he turned to attack, he found it had disappeared again and came at his back. Art surrendered, admitting that he couldn't even react to its speed at that level, and frankly, its form was trauma-inducing. Then Varian transformed into his elf form and said that he had been told, and it wasn't without its flaws. Using the integrate phase still took a bit out of him. Art replied that the movements were flawless, but even when Varian was behind him, he couldn't feel his presence. Varian picked up the sword and said that shadow panthers were able to instinctually manipulate wind and sound to achieve those effects. He thought he had bullied Art enough and suggested they actually start training. Days passed for Art, completely immersed in training. Through Varian's guidance and his own insights, he was able to access the first stage of his dragon will, and Varian had also taught Art to conceal the presence of his beast will in front of other mages. When he wasn't strengthening his mana core or studying Sylvie's dragon will, he was sparring against Varian. Luckily, the assimilation process allowed his body to keep up with the constant training and conditions. During his downtime, he spent as much time as he could embracing the joys and innocence of childhood, as Sylvie had wished for him, until the day of departure finally came. Spending every day together, those last few years made breaking the news of his approaching departure that much harder on Tess. Hi guys, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy the content.